like an empty shell, like my own mind is a prison cell. Feel myself sinking lower. Somebody poke me, I might fall over. Gotta keep cool, gotta maintain faith. Even when you feel foolish, like you lost the race. Cause it's not when it's too tough to take. It's long after you feel like you'll break. It's alright, alright. Hush, little darling, it's alright. Hide your eyes, so it's time to fight. Hush, little darling. I'll be the last man standing. Whoa, last man standing. Last man standing. I'll always be the last man standing. Wish I could shed my shame like an old snake skin, so empty.
Hello, everybody. It is Corey Poirier, and really excited to be back with the show. Also excited to have a brand new first-time guest. As our listeners know and viewers, I love bringing on new people to the show. We do bring return guests, but it's so cool to meet somebody new for the first time. So Tommy Rosen, really excited to have you here today. And I think, Tommy, the best starting point would be perhaps we'll get you to tell us a little bit about your backstory and journey for our listeners or viewers who may be discovering you for the first time.
Sure. Well, we could start with this morning. Sometimes it's good to start with the present moment. So I woke up today grateful to be a person on what I call a long-term path of discovery. That is a shift in language from person in long-term recovery. And I'm very grateful to be that person, and I've been that person now for 26 years. I practiced yoga this morning. I ate some really healthy food this morning. And now I get to talk to you this morning, which is very exciting. And get to share this work called Recovery 2.0 with people, and to talk about this thing, which is such an important and relevant conversation right now, which is addiction, how to recover from it, and perhaps most importantly, how to find freedom and peace and happiness on a path of recovery, or path of discovery, if you will.
Wow. So I'm going to dive in pretty deep, and sometimes the question will come to me and I go in a different direction. But when you said that about, for somebody that last stage, which is living with it and surviving it and getting past it and thriving, it seems like, you see it all the time, but that's obviously a short journey for some and a much longer journey for others. It's never, I don't think, an easy journey, but, some people get there maybe a little quicker to where they're past it, and other people, it's a struggle for years and years. Can you tell us, and I know this is a big question to start things off, but what are some of the things that you see that play a part in people that do get through it, whether it's shorter or longer?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that any human being has to have is an inspiration. You actually have to believe that, well, not only could I survive this thing, even stepping back before you get to that, I have a problem, I have a challenge. I have not been able to overcome this challenge yet. I'm looking for a way to overcome it. You have to first believe that it's possible. You also have to believe that when it's achieved, that when you're in that place of having survived this thing, that will be a better place than you are now. If you do believe that, that's a good place to start. So you're inspired to begin to get on a road of discovery and recovery, to move to your personal next step. Beyond that, you want to be inspired at every step of the way to understand the sky is the limit here. Someone has to present to you possibilities, opportunities. Hey, it used to be we were happy just to be sober. We just get to be sober today. Okay, that's a good thing from where we used to be. Great, we get that. We also need to thrive in life. We are wired for bliss. We want to seek it out. We want to alter our consciousness. We're also wired for that. But we want to do it in natural ways that promote our well-being and not demote us. So you need to know that those things are not only possible, they're probable, they're going to happen for you. If you stay on this path and if you have the right teachers, you'll be inspired and guided to this place called, let's just call it presence. That you get to be free and here in this present moment, the place we all spend so much time trying to avoid. And finally, we come to that present moment and we practice being there more and more. And lo and behold, the enormous challenges of our life dissolve. It's not that life isn't still hard and doesn't have its difficulties. It's just that at every step of the way, you have what it takes to be able to handle what life is throwing your way. You've become truly an observer of life, like the eye of the hurricane. The hurricane is still blowing, but you have found a place of peace within it. And now you get an opportunity to go even further and share that with somebody else, to help another human being have that same experience. And there it is. That's the purpose of life. We can end the interview now. We covered it all.
If everybody follows that, that's all they need to know.
That's it.
If everybody can make it happen. And, that's probably a good question as to why everybody can't. And I mean, I'm sure we can go there. But I guess the other thing out of that, in terms of when we look at people, that struggle through that, one of the things I heard that you said there related to it sounded like connection and nature. And I'm reading into that, but it sounds like those are big parts of it for people. Would you say that, connecting again with nature, because you mentioned eating well, practicing yoga, like, would you say that that's a big part of it whenever people do succeed with it? Like nature and getting back to sort of that oneness? And
yes, let's look at the concept of nature. Often, just like when people talk about God, most people think about God as an exterior thing to them. I want to connect with God. Like you have to go outside. Somehow you're going to have this connection, or, I want to go into nature. Well, there's actually nothing that is not nature. You are nature. So when you think about nature and this big concept of wanting to reconnect with it, don't leave yourself out. It's the first thing I would say is, yeah, you want to reconnect with nature. Your nature within, and you want to be in these beautiful natural environments, if that's what you mean. Sure, because those beautiful natural environments are inspiring, calming, centering, empowering. We literally draw power from entering and being a part of gorgeous, pristine, natural environments. We also get out of the electromagnetic hum of being in a city and being around, millions of people. I live in Los Angeles. We have 20 million people in greater Los Angeles County. And so there's a lot of psychic energy here. There's a lot of things going on here. There's a lot of traffic here and a lot of pulse, if you will, here. When I go 2 hours east to Joshua Tree National Park, that doesn't exist. I'm stepping into a different kind of energy, a different kind of hum, if you will. And it's the hum of nature. And I, as a natural being, can align with that natural vibration, that natural hum that I can get in a natural environment. And something happens for me. There's a remembrance. There's a healing. There's all of a sudden a much calmer state of being, like someone's reintroducing me to my nervous system. Oh, there you are, Tommy. You went off the reservation for a little while. Now you're back. And in being back, it feels very, very good. You're moving towards this thing called bliss. And I've used that word twice now, and it's very purposeful. You have to understand that bliss through drugs and alcohol is incredibly temporary. And it carries a great price. The bliss I'm talking about, of connecting with yourself and reconnecting with the natural way of being, is not limited to time. It's just a state of being that you get to be in. Pure awareness, pure presence, pure consciousness. And that kind of language that I'm using there is the result of yogic practice. Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's how I would answer that question.
And it's funny, I was going to ask you about when we talk about, nature and the fact that we are sort of not necessarily going into nature and it's already there. It's funny, I was going to ask you about, I've been into sweat lodges, First Nation sweat lodges. And I noticed that a big part of the sweat lodges, outside of the idea that you're getting back to sort of that oneness and you're sort of in the moment and there's a bunch of traditions involved. But I also noticed the ones I've been involved with, they've had animals there, like dogs running around, horses in the field nearby. And so I wonder if animal energy can be a part of that as well. But what's interesting, when I was going to ask you that, I'm working from home today at my home office, and as soon as I started talking about nature, my cat wanted to try to get in front of the screen.
I saw him or her show up. Can we get a visual?
Yeah, absolutely. Her name is Tantra, and she doesn't look too happy right now, but she's normally pretty happy.
I love her.
But we have a girl and a boy, brother and sister. The boy is all black, but she's like, he doesn't care about the screen or hear people talking. I think she thinks you're here and can't figure out why you can't pet her, because she tries to get in the way of the screen and that. So it's interesting. I started talking about nature, and literally she was sleeping way behind me in the office here, and then all of a sudden now she's in the mix. So
I love it. Well, I love Tantra. She's great, and her name is a very important Sanskrit word, which essentially means the projection of the heart. Tantra, projection of the heart, and not to be confused with projection of the mind. So the heart projection is what we're talking about. Even though in a lot of teachers and a lot of paths of yoga won't necessarily use that terminology, it all goes back to Tantra. That to me is the trunk, the main trunk of the tree that we're going back to. And Tantra tells us, experience life, experience presence. Addiction is to experience something manufactured, manipulated. You're not quite able to get to the present moment when you're stuck in active addiction. You're craving it, but you don't recognize what you're trying to get to. It's just the present moment. So you go off drugs, alcohol, food, sex, gambling, money, power, drama, whatever the distraction is. You're distracting yourself not because you're a bad person, not because you're a weak person. It's just a habit that has been developed in your life, a habit of looking away. And you think, your mind thinks at this point, well, the place where I find bliss is in these experiences of drugs and alcohol or whatever. And that's just temporary bliss. Not even really bliss. But then when you really taste it, when you're on this path of discovery and you connect with yourself and you start to feel that kind of good, and you say to yourself, you know what? There's no drugs and alcohol here. It's kind of like when you ride a bike for the first time. Look, no hands, and no training wheels. You don't need the drugs and the alcohol, but very much you are working on getting to that blissful state. And so I just want to be an example and say, it's possible. It is here for the taking. You just have to know how to get there. That's all.
So I guess that brings up a good follow-up question then. And I wanted to ask you, so don't let me forget to ask about when it comes to, I can ask you this now and then I'll go back. So I'll jump ahead and then jump back. But when it comes to addiction, you focus mostly on alcohol and drug addiction. But there's, in terms of other addictions, do you help people through those at all? I mean, I know there's a lot of others like gambling addictions and things like that. Or are those, even though they're all addictions, are those kind of a different addiction to work through and stuff like that?
So I definitely do not focus on drugs and alcohol. What I actually focus on is just addiction.
Okay. I didn't want to assume, so I guess I'd go there to see.
No problem. So addiction to me is any behavior you continue despite the fact that it brings negative consequences into your life. I speak and write quite a bit about the big six, which is drugs, alcohol, food, the people addictions, so that's codependency and sex addiction, other relationship disorders, money addictions, gambling, being constantly in a state of debt, shopping, and then technology. So using technology not as a means of improving your life, but as a means of avoiding your life in the million, billion ways that we can do that. So those are the big six, but we can go beyond that to the more subtle addictions of negative thinking, self-doubt, procrastination, and resentment. So those people will often push back and say, well, wait a minute, Tommy, those are not really addictions. You don't crave to be thinking negatively. You don't crave self-doubt. And I'll say, that's true. We don't crave what I call the 4 aggravations. We don't crave those, but they still fit my definition of addiction. any behavior you continue, despite the fact that it brings a negative consequence into your life. Negative thinking saps you of your life's energy, makes everything more difficult. Self-doubt is just negative thinking turned upon oneself. Procrastination sounds like this. I'm not going to do what I know I need to do. Instead, I'm going to distract myself from the pain I'm feeling because I'm not doing what I need to do. It's kind of like, resentment. I'm so angry with you based upon something else that happened to me in the past. And I can't release it, so I'm going to carry it. And I'm going to carry it until you make the apology to me that I think you owe me. Therefore, I have no power. I've given away my power. And all my power, my potential for happiness now lays in your hands. Someone wants to talk to you behind you there.
Yeah.
It's just his mother. He has to go get his baby.
I love it.
Are you okay for a second, Tommy? It's so basically my 6-month-old baby. They're minding him today while my girlfriend's gone on her first time away from the baby. So
Hi there.
is that cool if I go grab him? And
Of course.
I can't carry him down the stairs. I hurt my knee.
Okay.
I'll be back in like 2 minutes.
All right.
So it was good. We just finished that area because I wanted to dive into something right after. I'll be right back.
Sure. Wow.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
We got a lot of energy going on in here today. That's for
That's
sure.
good. Beautiful.
I have it's weird. It's just, I usually am working on the road and I do most of my interviews on the road. So it's an adjustment for me, but I even have the dog down by my feet and it's just a lot of
Amazing.
energy.
Love it.
Awesome. So I knew where I wanted to go from there. So I just finished that question. So, when we talk about that, the various different types of addictions, and then you mentioned people need to know there is sort of an answer. I guess the $1 million question is, when you're working with people, where do you see them finding the answer? I'm curious, what the first steps are, or what kind of steps you see them take, or what steps they need to take based on all the work you do.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you and your viewers or listeners to go on a little bit of a journey with me as we understand this thing called addiction a little bit better. So try to forget. Try just for a moment to be the jury, and we're not going to admit some of the evidence that's come into the courtroom. So we're going to try to let go of our preconceived notions about addiction. Fair?
Absolutely fair.
Okay, so we're just starting at the beginning. Addiction is not a curse. It is a vehicle whereby some people are chosen to realize their fullest potential. Addiction is not a curse. It's a vehicle for an individual to realize their fullest potential. Now, people will say, wait a minute, Tommy, what are you talking about? This is killing people in the world. Addiction has light and dark like everything else. The light side of it is it forges you into a particular kind of human being with a particular characteristic. What is that characteristic? It's called humility. Now, my friend says there are two kinds of people in the world. People who are humble and people who are about to be. And anyone who faces addiction is going to be moving along that line to becoming a more humble person. If that doesn't work, the next step on the train is humiliation. You will be humbled or you will be humiliated. If that doesn't work, you might not make it. You might not survive. you might take an action or make a mistake, especially around the opiates and other drugs that can kill you. And you might die from this dis-ease, this lack of ease. But addiction as a catalyst for transformation is one of the most extraordinary things in human experience that readies a person to go as far as they can possibly go on their path of spirit, so their spiritual path, but also every area of their life. The way that they can affect and be in the world is extraordinary. And I see this in these amazing people that have really gotten the message about recovery from addiction and have elevated their life and their whole being to the next level. So if you can begin to think about addiction not as a curse, but as something that could be the greatest thing that ever happened to you, and you can find and begin to get on that path of recovery, which will become a path of discovery, and you can do that work, then you are headed for an existence that one couldn't possibly describe in words. It's beyond your wildest dreams what can happen. That's what we're talking about.
So I guess then, what are, when you talk about taking those steps and being on that path, what are some of those steps? Like, for example, you mentioned yoga that you practice, eating better. We talked about being at one with nature, and not necessarily in nature, but with nature, being yourself. What are some of the actual steps that you see people take?
Well, first thing is, and I say that, for me, there's always another human being involved. Let's just call them an angel in human form. When you speak to somebody who's had an amazing transformation in their life, usually there was someone who showed love, who showed connection, who showed presence, who was able to guide somebody through a dark period. So it always, for me, the first step that people take is really to say, I don't have this on my own. I need help. I recognize that I've gotten off track and I need help. Could you help me? Now that's the first step. That's an action that a person, almost everybody, takes to begin to get onto a new path in life. It doesn't just apply to addiction. It applies to anyone who's trying to achieve something they haven't done before. So if you want to run a marathon and you have no idea how to train for it, likely you're going to ask somebody, hey, what are some of the best practices for training for a marathon? I don't want to get injured. I want to nourish myself well, and I want to methodically bring my body to better cardiovascular shape so I can run a marathon someday. There'll be direction that you need to take. Same with addiction, same with any other thing. The good news about addiction is you can heal from it. That's the wonderful news. It's not a life sentence. You can heal. Now, once you heal, now you're on the path. The path is a life sentence. The path is a life sentence. That's good. You want that life sentence. That's the greatest life sentence you could be, given. I get to be on a path of discovery. I'm ever evolving. I'm ever changing. I'm ever growing. The possibilities and the healing is surpassing what I ever thought was possible on a one day at a time basis forever. Wow, that's the coolest thing ever, right? So this thing that was addiction, which almost killed me, and has taken so many of my friends, and has taken so many people every day, turns out like the flip side of that is, hey, get on the path of recovery. And as much danger as there used to be, that's the level of progress that can be made once you turn that corner and you get into the process of recovery. So asking another human being for help is a big step. Getting help. So new routines, right? 90 meetings in 90 days. Why do they say that in 12-step programs? It's not random. Actually, we want to establish a new routine in our life. Turns out that when we go to meetings, we connect with other people who have similar challenges. We hear stories and we share stories. There's an intimacy that gets created. It's a beautiful thing. What else? Well, we have to pick a program. It can be a 12-step program. That's the largest scale, habit-changing thing that ever took place on this planet. The largest scale habit-changing mechanism, right, is 12 steps. Millions and millions and millions and millions of people have experienced that transformation that those steps provide. Great. It's not the only way, though. There are smart recovery meetings. There are refuge recovery meetings. That's a Buddhist approach. There are celebrate recovery meetings. That's a Christian approach. I mean, there's all kinds of flavors to meet all kinds of folks. So you need help from a community. You need a path to walk. Helps to have a good teacher. And then you can talk about all the other things that we add in. Yoga, meditation, healthy diet, of course. These are our fundamental human necessities. And we can look at those things once we get our feet back underneath us. Because when we've been in abject addiction, we're pretty torn up for a while. It takes a little while to come back physically, to get our mental clarity together before we can address the deeper aspects of our life and why we're here.
Wow. So I guess then, I'm curious about something else that you mentioned, and I'm sure this is a struggle, but I'm sure at the same time, it's happened enough that you found sort of the way through it. And I might be way off base there, but you mentioned losing people, and I'm sure you've lost people that you've become really close to, and then people that you just, you've heard of through other friends that you know. But when it comes to addiction, you lose probably a lot more people than most other ways. So the question out of that is, how do you deal with that? How do you make peace with that or cope with that, losing people that you care about to this addiction that is so dangerous and affecting so many?
Yeah. So I guess the yogic thing to say is, I sit as the eye of the hurricane through it, and I accept it, and I'm at peace with it, and I do my mourning process and my grieving process, and I move on from it. But that's really not true. I'm not at peace with it. I experience great anger around it. It makes me very, very sad. I do my best. I do my grief work. I do my mourning of people lost, and I pray and I meditate and I do all the things that I do, and I'm a living example of someone who's not going to die from addiction. That's what I do. Some days, especially when someone close to me dies from the dis-ease of addiction, it just completely takes the wind out of my sails. There's no other way to put it. It sucks. And it always feels, the feeling always is, what more could have been done? Mm-hmm. Is there anything more that one could have done? I'm not as egoic to think, is there anything more that I could have done? I recognize no one of us is in control of anyone else's destiny. If someone dies from this disease, it's not anyone else's fault. It's not their fault. It's an unfolding of things that ended up in a very sad kind of way. But no, I'm not at peace with it, to be honest. And that's why maybe I work so hard and want people to get this message that you do not need to change your life. The thing you do not need to die from this thing. You need to change your life. And the thing you're looking for, the thing you've always been looking for, is on the other side of addiction. It's never coming for you in active addiction. So the thing you're looking for, the thing you want, the thing you need, the connection, the love, the feeling of belonging, the feeling that you contributed, that you have a purpose here, a meaning, all of that is coming to you on your path of recovery and discovery.
So when you mentioned passion and purpose, that's going to be my next question as we start to wind down. But my girlfriend had asked me to ask you one question that she was curious about. And I mentioned to you sort of off air that she follows your work. And her question was about yourself and your wife. If you guys met each other through through the work that you do, and she was more relating to, doing the work, like even just yoga and helping people, retreats and things like that? Or did you guys meet each other and one of you guys bring the other one into that, if that makes sense?
Both of us had been practicing yoga long before we met, but not exactly like we are now. So the path of yoga, like the path of life, the path of discovery, the path of recovery, changes, right? So it naturally evolves. So when you first step onto a yoga mat in a classroom, you're in a certain kind of a body. You have certain kinds of needs. Your mind works in certain kinds of ways. 5 years later, 10 years later, 25 years later, you're in a completely different body with different needs and different reality going on in your life. I'm in a 50-year-old body. When I started, I was in a 24-year-old body. So yoga has changed for me over time. When I met Kia, I was 9 years into my path of discovery with both recovery and yoga. I started both the same year, 1991. So when I met Kia in the year 2000, I was 9 years into some kind of a relationship with yoga, but it changed so drastically in the years since then that it almost doesn't resemble the same thing. Like now I have a practice. I understand so much more. I'm more aware than I used to be. I still am a beginner to all of my next steps, but where I was in 2000, it's almost as if that person doesn't exist anymore. And I owe that evolution to the path of yoga and the path of recovery together. Kia became a teacher and focused her effort on teaching before I did. We were married by this point, but it was her inspiration and her dedication to that path that drew me in further along the path of yoga. So I was hugely influenced by her. I also have taken 500 hours of training from her directly in her trainings that she does. So, I mean, no question, I've made it further in my life with her than I ever could have on my own. That's for sure. So does that answer your question about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. She'll love that answer. So awesome stuff. So the next three questions, Tommy, you can answer them as quick as you want, but I used to call them rapid fire and I have no idea why.
Hang on one sec.
Yeah.
Apologies.
Oh, no worries. I'm going to let the dog out anyway. I think he's trying to get out now. Let's see if she wants to go out. Are you going out? Okay, everybody go see. Okay, good. So basically these next three questions, Tommy, I used to call them rapid fire. It's the wind down questions. You can answer them as quick as you want. They're actually the only questions that have any sort of basically pre-planned component to my interviews at all. But I always try to ask these three questions. So you mentioned purpose and passion, and people will say your why or your calling. So whatever words you want to put on it, I say that because I hear some people getting backlash these days to the word passion. But that said, whichever way you want to call it, do you think it's important for a person to uncover it? And if so, why?
If you do not have a purpose and a mission that's clear to you, then your purpose and mission is to find your purpose and mission. That's the purpose of life.
Wow. That's a pretty profound answer. Love that. So this is kind of somewhat related, but at the same time, you can answer this either personally and professionally or both, whatever works for you. But how do you define success?
Success is a byproduct of living in the present moment.
Wow.
It's a relationship with the inner world. Success has nothing to do with the outer world. The outer world will respond to your inner world success in very, very positive ways. But that's, again, a further byproduct of the only true success, which is the success of a person connecting with themselves and feeling at ease and at peace.
So last official question, and then I'll give you the hint. The unofficial one's just going to be how, finding out how we can learn more, how we can connect with you further. But the last official question, probably my favorite question because of the different answers I get. But if you were able to sit across from, and you mentioned, when you met your wife, you were at one place, you've transformed since then. But if you were able to sit across from a younger Tommy, and you can pick the age because you know when you were struggling most, but you could give him one or two pieces of life advice based on what you've learned in the years since. What do you think you might tell that younger Tommy?
Tommy, could you please be more patient? It's all happening. It's not going to happen at your pace. There is a plan. Your case is being considered. Don't give up. Keep the faith. Magic is happening. Engage in it. All will be well.
Love it. So, Tommy, this has been an absolute pleasure, as I mentioned. My very last question is simply, how can people learn more about your work, what you're doing, if they want to reach out and connect with you? Where do you normally send people?
So we launched our site to help people to find the necessary materials in terms of video for them to learn yoga, to learn how to breathe, to meditate, to learn about recovery in this new way that we're looking at recovery and addiction. And that's all taking place at r20.com. That's the letter R for recovery, the number 2, the number 0, just 3 characters, r20.com.
Love it. Well, like I say, Tommy, this has been an absolute pleasure. So I'm just going to send a big thank you out for taking the time to spend with us today. And thank you to Kia for allowing us to make that possible. I mean, I'm sure she does a lot of work behind the scenes that makes it all possible too. And a thank you from my girlfriend, Shelly, who, like I said, she already had some questions coming into this. So thank you so much for making this possible today, bringing such great energy and being so gracious with all your insight.
Well, thank you so much, Corey. Grateful, and keep up the amazing work you're doing.